Good evening, everyone. It's a really great privilege and pleasure to welcome you to tonight's conversation on The Confident Jew Goes to College. For those of you I don't know, I'm Eric Cohen, the Executive Director here at Tikvah, and it's really a privilege not only to welcome you to tonight's discussion, but to inaugurate a new initiative of Tikvah called the Jewish Parents Forum. So, in the last year or so, education has emerged as the defining cultural and political issue of our times. We've seen this in political debates, cultural debates, discussions about what are we teaching our kids, why does it matter, what do we stand for as Americans, and for us in particular as Jews. And I think I can say, as we can often say, the Jews were worried first. We had reasons to be concerned that Zionism and Israel were being treated not as a land of great political achievement, as the rebirth of the Jewish people in their homeland, but as an oppressor state. Concerned that America, a land that has given the Jewish people so much liberty and freedom and opportunity, was being treated as the land of sin rather than as the land of hope. Concerns about what was being taught in our colleges, and whether a new environment, the cancel culture, the woke culture, was stifling the richness of serious intellectual debate and conversation that is the heart and soul of a true liberal education. So this initiative, the Jewish Parents Forum, is certainly born of some concerns, but it's more importantly born out of a sense of hope, that we need to think together about how to build oases of educational excellence from grade school to high school to college, to help think about what our young Jews, our young Zionists, our young Americans should be learning, and how to marry these great ideas, this incredible inheritance of Jews, of Israel, of America, and to pass it down to our young people, to our children. And so I'm here tonight not only to inaugurate this forum, and not only as the head of the Tikvah Fund, but also as a parent of 4 young Jewish kids, trying to navigate for ourselves how to think about their own educational future and trajectory. We also launched this initiative with a sense of the importance of a community, and a community that links together people who are a little further along, like some of the exceptional college students and recent alums that we've had the privilege to work with over the years, who have practical wisdom to pass down to high school students following in their wake. And that's the spirit of tonight's discussion, to think together about what does it mean to head off to college as a confident Jew in search of a liberal education, in search of a Zionist education, in search of an American education that deepens those attachments, those noble attachments, rather than undermines them. It's really a great privilege to thank 4 remarkable women, Liz Lang, Carolyn Rowan, Nina Davidson, and Rebecca Sugar, who helped create this initiative that we hope to grow in the days and years ahead. And it's really a privilege to turn this over to my colleague, my cherished colleague, Alan Rubenstein, who has been running our university programs for many, many years and who will lead tonight's conversation. So to welcome to all of you, thanks for being here, and I'm sure it'll be a lively discussion. Alan, I turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you, Eric, very much. Welcome everybody here, everybody out there watching over Zoom. A happy Veterans Day to all of you. Those of you who have served or have people in your family that have served, those of you home that have served, thank you very much. As Eric said, I'm the Director of University Programs for the Tikvah Fund. So I've had a lot of opportunity to interact with college students over the years, and college administrators and teachers and rabbis that work on college campuses, which is a real privilege. I'm also a parent of 3 children. My oldest is 13, so I guess the college anxieties are just starting to come over the horizon for us. Look, I want to start by saying, nothing that's worth doing comes easy, right? Nothing that's worth doing comes to us without challenges and obstacles. We all know that, and this is definitely true of college. This is always true of college. Success is not guaranteed because you get an acceptance note. I think that one of the reasons that college can be a challenging place to find success is that we ask for a lot of different things out of college. We think of college as a place where success is measured in many different ways at once. We expect for college to be a place where we get preparation for a career, where we get credentials, where we get contacts, where we get skills that will be able to allow us to pursue the work after college that we want to. We also expect from college the liberal arts goals that Eric was alluding to. We should learn deep and important things. We should meet inspiring teachers. This is a different goal, a different way of measuring what it means to succeed in college. And let's be honest, college is also just a time to experience your independence for the first time and to choose what you do with your time and be away from parental supervision and ideally to grow as a person by choosing activities that are meaningful and that, that call out to you. Now, these are different ends, and to succeed in any of these things is challenging, and to succeed in all at once is especially challenging because they compete with each other. These are a natural challenges that make it sometimes difficult to succeed as a college student. And we could have a conversation about these kinds of challenges and how they're overcome at any time. But we're having this panel tonight, obviously, because there are other sorts of pressing concerns. And I think of these as another layer of challenge, another dimension of challenge that is a product of our particular time, our particular cultural moment. Eric alluded to it. We have a sort of social movement going on. Maybe we call it a cultural upheaval. I don't know exactly what to call it. Do we call it the woke movement? Do we call it a new conception of racism and anti-racism? Do we call it the social justice movement? Do we refer to intersectionality and critical race theory? Do we talk about cancel culture? I mean, if I say all of these words, of course we could spend a lot of time thinking about what each of them mean, but I think you'll understand what I'm gesturing at. And I think we know that this is a big phenomenon that is afoot in our culture, and that it really began and was nurtured and nourished and grew up in the universities. That's where these movements really don't seem like something new under the sun. They seem like they've been around for a while. And it's still the case that it's the place where this particular ideology and this particular kind of activism is really at its strongest, most confident, most virulent. And I would assert, and I think the premise of our event tonight is that this adds another layer of challenge to students who are trying to succeed in college, who are trying to succeed in professional preparation, who are trying to succeed in building their character, who are trying to succeed in having this great opportunity for learning. So, feeling that this is the case, we conceived of this panel so that you could hear from some people who have real experience, recent experience, being college students. And it's a great pleasure to me, under any circumstances and on any topic, to bring some of the students that we work with at the Tikvah Fund to an audience of parents. These students are, a real joy to me and my life because of what we have been able to do in classrooms together in Tikvah programs. And of course, we brought also with us really a professor that we all look up to. We've all admired what she's done. We've all met her students that she has affected. And we've all read things that she has written to reflect on the culture and the campus. So we'll get to hear from Ruth Wisse as well. So what I ask these students to do is just to reflect on the challenges to succeeding in college, and particularly the challenges that derive from the cultural moment that we're living through, and maybe to offer some advice to students who are on the verge of going to college or to their parents based on their experience. So the students that we've brought, or the recent students we brought, Talia Katz went to the University of Michigan and came into Tikvah's world as a summer fellow a couple of summers ago. She's now in the workforce and doing very interesting work that her Tikvah experience helped her to bridge to. Raina Weinstein, who went to the University of Chicago and who actually works for this amazing Jewish organization called the Tikvah Fund. And Hoffman, who is a current junior at Princeton and hasn't done the summer fellowship yet, but has done a tremendous amount of learning with Tikvah beginning when he was in high school. So I want to begin with giving each of our students a chance to speak in turn to this question, and then I'll invite Professor Wisse to respond to what she's heard them say and to offer her own reflections on this question. And I think I've asked Ruth, if I can say, specifically to enlighten us on what this is like for someone who's trying to bring the richness of Judaism to this moment, richness of a Jewish education to what we're seeing as these challenges that are arising on campus. I want you to welcome our students. They're nervous, as you would be in their place, to be put on the spot and to offer their thoughts on something that's so vexed and so personal. So I thank you guys very much for being brave and answering the call to do this. So Talia, if you would go first.
So I don't want to make this all war stories. I don't want to scare anybody, but I do think a couple are really instructive. So I'm going to explain kind of the main one that really shaped me personally and professionally. I was at Michigan during a really uniquely challenging time. It was right before the 2016 election, and then right after. The first BDS resolution was passed. And at that moment, the Jewish community was pretty fractured and frankly apathetic. And I was pretty quiet in class. You realize quickly how dogmatic 18-year-olds can be. I was in a public policy program, so we talked about politics all the time. And I figured at the time that I wasn't intellectually ready to be the token devil's advocate, so I kind of sat back, listened, took it all in. And I got to a point where I became really frustrated with how conversations were conducted. I was frustrated with the partisanship. There was a lot of motive attribution that I observed. You know, people saying, if you support Israel, then you must be an Islamophobe and a racist. Or, you know, I heard that if you want to privatize a municipal water system, then you are racist. Not sure how that conclusion happened, but you see the motive attribution was really core to a lot of class discussions. And it was frustrating. It was intellectually lazy. And my professors encouraged this intellectual laziness because the ultimate conclusions my classmates would reach would align with my professors' political motives. And when you're in a bubble, people become very tribalist. My professors went along with it and encouraged it. And it bled into Jewish spaces as well. I discovered that just because an organization is labeled a Jewish home doesn't necessarily mean that they will help you grow Jewishly. Because sometimes politics supplants Jewish identity, unfortunately, and you'll come to learn that and have to figure out how to navigate it. So basically what I did was I wrote an article to air my grievances and put it in my student newspaper. And I basically just said, let's talk to each other better. This is unproductive. This is not what the university should be. Let's move forward together and have better conversations. Didn't think much would come of it. I thought it was frankly poorly written, and who reads their student newspaper op-ed section. But shockingly, it did make some waves. Some classmates were angry, and they published libelous articles about me. Some of them would corner me after class and ask me, do you think X is racist? Would you interact with Y because of what they said, and et cetera, et cetera. And the hostility was not unexpected, but still a shock to the system. And you know, that being said, on the other side of this, I found a really amazing community of people who I otherwise would not found if I stayed silent. Administrators and professors actually were pretty supportive. They wanted to hear me out. They wanted to see how can we make the environment better for heterodox views. I got to speak to some classes. My article was part of class syllabi. And I think most importantly, I found a really valuable ally and a mentor. An accounting professor in the School of Business for master's students. I would never interact with him if I had not spoken out. And he created a space for me to form a worldview on my own. We disagreed on everything, but he really showed me that, you know, in a university you can be intellectually curious and ask questions. So I think an important lesson to come from this is being attacked does not mean you are canceled. Although I was brutally attacked in my student newspaper, I found a great community and a mentor, and I was able to affect some change. Not every experience is perfect and butterflies and rainbows in college. No experience really is. But I became a more thoughtful person and more engaged with my community, and a community that aligns with my values and embraces free thinking. And I found a wonderful Jewish community as well, who valued me for who I am and invited me into their home, and I was able to have Shabbat every Friday, which I never did growing up, to observe Shabbat in that way. So it really was a net benefit for me. But just to kind of wrap up, and I hope you forgive this parallel. When Allied forces were preparing to land on D-Day, division commanders will tell their men, just, everything will go according to plan. Just stick with your training. We know what to expect. And there was one assistant division commander, Brigadier General Norman Cota, who said, be prepared for everything to go wrong. Be prepared to improvise. Don't have any expectations, basically. I think that's a little extreme, but I think it's important to keep in mind. I don't think you should feel like you should go to college in a suit of armor, ready to withstand a barrage of anti-Semitic attacks and character assassination and cancellation. I think that mindset may force you to constantly look for reasons to feel like a victim, and that will make your college experience miserable. Maybe your college experience is not as crazy as mine or as others, and that's okay. And you don't have to be apathetic when things seem deeply wrong and gets in the way of your own development. But either way, you will find allies. You will find out who are the people who matter to you, who matters to your personal, professional, and intellectual development. And that's really, I think, an important goal of college. Lastly, I would keep in mind that iron sharpens iron. If you already have heterodox points of view, whether you're an outspoken Zionist, an observant Jew, classical liberal, any other identity that seems unpopular within academia, I think you're at an advantage, actually. You will constantly face arguments that conflict with your understanding of the world. And I think that's a crucial life experience and, frankly, the purpose of college. You become a critical and independent thinker, impervious to indoctrination, I think. And that should be embraced. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to look outside of university for answers, like places like the Tikvah Fund. It's a wonderful privilege to dedicate 3 or 4 years of your life to just learning. And I would encourage you to take advantage of that and embrace the challenges to improve yourself and your community and the Jewish people. That's all I have to say, really. I think that's the most important thing you should keep in mind when you go to college.
Talia, I didn't know you were going to have such a Veterans Day appropriate message at the center of your life. That was great. Okay, Raina, we'd love to hear from you next.
Thank you. So I want to share 2 stories of kind of the pro-Israel discourse and scene from when I was in college. I went through quite a journey in terms of that, which I will share in a second. But to some of the students in the audience, I just want to talk about maybe where I was a little bit before I went to college, which might be a little bit, where you are right now. So I went to a progressive prep school for high school. I was your classic ambitious high schooler. I was captain of the cross-country team, editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, on student government, all of those things. I knew I wanted to go to a top university, and I had my choice of quite a few, and I chose to go to the University of Chicago. Part of how I chose to go there was I spent a Shabbat at the colleges that I was looking at. And I wasn't Shomer Shabbat at the time, I wasn't Sabbath observant, but I knew that a Jewish community would be an important part of my college experience, and I wanted to go to the place where I felt like I fit in the most at Shabbat dinner. So I just wanted to put that out there as friendly advice to all the students watching this. Now moving on to my actual experience when I was in college. So when I got to college, I joined the University of Chicago's chapter of J Street U. I was motivated by a deep love of Israel, which might be shocking to a lot of people watching and sitting in the audience. But I really felt like fighting for the two-state solution was the best way that I could advocate for Israel in college. Our student leaders in J Street U were diverse. They had a lot of different reasons for wanting to be a part of J Street U. Some felt like it was important to represent that you could be a Zionist and part of the left, that you could fight the occupation and still be pro-Israel. Many different reasons. And from the first year and a half of college, I would say J Street U was a wonderful home for me. Until later in my college years, when some of these culture wars that Alan mentioned really stepped up a level, especially after the 2016 election, and a speaker was invited to the University of Chicago who had served in the Trump administration. Everyone on my J Street U chapter's board wanted to come out against the speaker in one of these so-called, speaker cancellations. And I didn't have particularly strong feelings on the issue, but student clubs in college are democracies, so if the vast majority thought that this is how it should go, that's what we were going to do. So we decided to team up with all these other activist organizations on campus to sign a letter coming out against this speaker. The letter came out on a Friday, a few hours before Shabbat, and I looked at the list of names of who had signed it. It was in the Maroon, our student newspaper, and J Street U was not on the list. I called the organizer. I asked why wasn't our name there. He said, sorry, SJP signed the letter, and they just didn't want any Zionists on it. So that was a pretty disheartening moment in which I kind of realized that no matter how progressive your pro-Israel politics would be, the activist left will never accept you. It's not necessarily about the occupation. It's about a lot of other issues at play. That summer, I wound up doing a lot of rethinking, and I found myself in the Tikvah Summer Fellowship, which was an incredible experience led by Alan over here, in which I actually had the opportunity to think about issues, to pause, to not necessarily be involved in the campus wars, to be involved in whatever the hottest activism fad was in community organizing, and to really think deeply. And I came back to campus with the desire to share this with other students. So I teamed up with several students who had also gone through Tikvah programming, and we created a course called Debating Zionism, which was really just a reading group that we ran out of the University of Chicago's Hillel with help from the Tikvah Fund. We took a lecture series that Dr. Micha Goodman, a fantastic scholar of Zionism and Jewish thought, had given at the Tikvah Fund, and we paired them up with some of the readings that were part of this series. The readings really focused on Israel's and Zionism's founding debates. So we would watch Dr. Goodman and we would read primary text of Herzl, Jabotinsky, Ahad Ha'am, and discuss the real issues at the crux of Zionism that are truly about what does it mean to be a Jew, what does it mean to be a part of the Jewish people, and what does it mean for the Jews to govern ourselves. And we appealed to the intellectual curiosity of our peers to ask essential questions about what it means to be Jewish, rather than just sitting on the surface level of all these debates about Zionism on campuses today. These groups were a huge success. Our Hillel actually didn't expect it to be. We had like 60 people show up. There were Zionist students, there were anti-Zionist students, but we all sat with these texts in front of us and we engaged thoughtfully and respectfully with these ideas. And so I guess by way of advice, I want to say that being a confident Jew means being confident enough to look past the campus culture wars, to look past the superficial arguments about Israel and Zionism that are going on, and to really look to the riches of the Jewish tradition, whether that's in terms of Zionist intellectual history or in terms of Torah and learning, and to be confident enough to know that that is really where the heart of being a Jew on campus is. So, thank you.
Thank you, Raina. So, Raina, I know the real turn was when I made you deliver a response to Ruth at the Summer Fellowship when we were reading her Jews and Power, and I said, so. That was really good. You did a fantastic job there and here. Adam, please come on up.
Thanks so much, Professor Rubenstein, and I'm really honored to be on this panel, especially so with the eminent Ruth Wisse. So Professor Rubenstein asked me to speak about what I do in college and in my extracurriculars. To answer that question, I think we must first consider a more important question. What ought I be doing in my classrooms and my extracurriculars? Well, for one, learning. In college, I had to be engaging with texts and ideas that I know or thought I knew, and exposing myself to new ones. In the liberal model of education, I'm to challenge my most cherished beliefs and re-examine even those practices that define my identity. As Max Weber in Science as a Vocation would have it, the primary task of a useful teacher is to teach his students to recognize inconvenient facts. I mean facts that are inconvenient for their party option. So under this model, no belief should be left unscathed, no view can be left triumphant. Fair enough, but to what end? Should there be a limit to this questioning? I argue yes. College, in my experience at Princeton, will push you to check your beliefs at the door and endorse a radical skepticism. As I've seen it, it is only lip service that is paid towards true and open inquiry. With exceptions made for fashionable truths, belief itself is degraded as archaic or unenlightened. Belief in God? How could you be so silly? Belief in the greatness of the Jewish civilization? Well, that is a supremacist and hateful proposal. As I was told only yesterday, if I trust in Israel's moral legitimacy, then I haven't thought for myself. So how could the detractors of these ideas, the ideas that those of us in Tikvah's networks care about, be so certain that I am wrong if they are radical skeptics themselves? I think it is because they have their own epistemological position. Yes, question your beliefs if they are your beliefs, but no, don't question. In fact, you are forbidden from questioning your beliefs or beliefs tied to your identity. Your skin color, for instance, will bestow upon you a knowledge of a certain sacred truth. For they are those beliefs drawn from your tradition or reason, say, support of Israel, and then there are those beliefs which are inherent to your assigned identity, say, your oppression by Israel. Where's the line between the two? Which ideas get categorized as reasonable versus identity determined? You'll have to ask Twitter, and it will probably depend on the hour. So to Professor Rubenstein's question, what do I do in my classes and extracurriculars? Can you navigate the challenges of college while still maintaining thought integrity? Yes and no. No, there are certain professors who will grade based on your beliefs. There are political clubs, as I have experienced, which will only let you take part in certain discussions if you meet particular identity categories. Most recently for me, I was forbidden from joining a conversation on the American justice system because of my light skin. That's the no. But there's also a cheery yes. In 1921, Franz Rosenzweig wrote to Gershom Scholem on the nascent academic Jewish studies. In a sense, we are ourselves guests at our own table. We ourselves, I myself. So long as we speak German, we cannot avoid this detour that again and again leads us the hard way from what is alien back to our own. Rosenzweig, I think, offers a model for the confident Jew in college today. Recognize that we are not sitting at our own table. We are guests, and that means that we must come bearing a gift. Instead of undermining what our parents have bequeathed us upon matriculation, we can take that inheritance and share it with others. In class discussion, when possible, offer the unappreciated Jewish perspective. In a recent seminar on global justice, I pushed back on suggestions for the same treatment of Americans and foreigners, family, and strangers. As I know from my Jewish tradition, we can only learn to love the foreigner if we have particular love for America, only love the stranger if we love our family. College can be an occasion to upend your life, or it can be an occasion to celebrate the life you have been gifted. With the guide of our parents and the resources of institutions like Tikvah, college students can contribute to their communities for the benefit of all. So what do I do in college? At the least, I try to learn from others and allow others to learn from my tradition.
Okay, thank you, Talia. Okay, well, that's a great transition to, I think, many of the truths about Jewish self-confidence that I've learned from Professor Wisse. So, Professor Wisse, I'd like to give you the podium.
Very generous, but I must say that I feel out of place and more nervous than usual. In a way, I don't really belong here because what I have to say I wouldn't have wanted to hear when I was going to college. I came from a very Jewish home into college, and I found after the first year that I wanted to get out. I wanted to meet people unlike myself. I wanted to explore. And here I am so many years later on the other end of the spectrum. And I think it has to do not just because I'm so much older. I think to some extent it has to do because of the changes that have happened between the time that I went to school and what you have been describing. I was not in an adversarial relationship with the school. There was no such thing. It was an open campus, welcoming, Everyone was free to be, and that questioning that you spoke of, and that it was so different. And so that one of the things I wish is that I could simply take everybody, all the students, and just say to you, listen, I'm going to give you the experience that I had. Why should you be saddled with this? Why should you be oppressed with this? Couldn't I have created a better world for you? Well, it seems not. And so here's the strange thing that I have to say. That there's a Jewish expression, wie es christelt sich, so jidelt sich. It's also a German expression, it's pronounced differently. What it means is, as go the Christians, so go the Jews. And it's said very much self-critically. What it means is that Jews follow all the other trends. They're always the followers in things. They adapt whatever's in fashion. And you can see how Jews can be accused of that. But sometimes, like right now, things are very different, because Jews are also said to be the canary in the mine. What does that mean? It means that when there is poison afoot, the Jews are not the followers, but the Jews go first. And so now we are the trendsetters, not in the way that we would have wished, but we're the ones who are the targets of all these movements that you have been describing. So now we find ourselves in this situation where the question is really what to do about this. Well, as you so rightly pointed out, there's not one answer to this, and I don't know whether anyone can prescribe, because to be nimble, as you said rightly, you have to be agile, and you have to have the ability to adapt and to think and to be open, not to be defensive, because exactly, it's still a free country, and one still goes into it with the idea of getting out of whatever it is situation one is in as much as one possibly can. So I would say that 3 things I can think of. One is been alluded to here and is so obvious, and that is that you have to have the confidence going in. And you have to acquire it very quickly if you don't have it. That self-confidence is represented in the people here because to some extent you draw it from home, and you draw it from what you come from, early schooling, communal institutions, and education. So I would say that Tikvah was very far-sighted in this. It is, we're in a crisis of education, as you say, Eric, but that crisis of education is one that Tikvah answered to even before it became so critical, because it knew that it had to supplement, it had to supply what was not there in the universities, both intellectually and in this sense of moral self-confidence. And that, in a sense, is what Tikvah has been doing. It started at a very advanced level. Give me your most advanced students. But now, my granddaughters are Tikvah students, and they are in high school. This is all shoring up in order to reinforce the self-confidence through knowledge and using creative learning to build that confidence. I think that thousands of Jews could make a difference if they began using their presence effectively. So the crisis is there, one cannot escape it. And here's the thing, most of our young people are going to attend college. So there is now, I hear people like Liel Leibovitz today suggesting that, maybe it's not such a great idea to go to college. Maybe we should withdraw into our own institutions. Maybe we should build our own centers. Well, I think that one has to supplement, certainly, whatever is out there. You have to come in, as you say, with who you are, very importantly. But coming into it, I would say we are not guests in America. We're not guests in America. This is the country that we inhabit. We are its citizens. This education crisis, this crisis, is a crisis to bring down America as America knows itself. It's not just to bring down the Jews, but I think since we are the ones being assaulted, the more confidence we can bring into the universities, the more we can help this country get past what it is going through at this moment. And so I think that one has a kind of a double obligation. It's not just that you don't fold before the attack. That's not enough at all. That we have to be the ones to reinforce the positive, to show what real learning is, to introduce the subjects and to show how to learn. Jews really know how to learn. They have methodologies of how to learn. They have a tradition of how to learn. So it's exactly as you say, to come into every class and to be prepared to put yourself out there and to make the Jewish case, whether you know a tiny little bit or a lot. When it should become second nature that one does it. And when one is doing this, I would say one is doing it for America. Not just for the Jewish people. One is doing it certainly for the betterment of the university. And so this is our form of altruism. And now maybe because this is Veterans Day, I would also come to this, but this is not the first time I have thought of this. Israelis know that they have to defend their country. And they know that the people who have to defend their country are the people, guess what, of college age. And so it's after high school that Israelis go for several years into the army to learn how to defend. And they know that you have to train in order to defend. Everybody wants to defend their country, but to learn how to do it, it takes a group, it takes all kinds of things, and you have to learn the techniques. So I would say that American parents and children, and the Jews first and foremost, we have to think of a 3-year army service, whatever we call it. When you're in college, if you're not going into ROTC, and that's a very good idea too, to go into Reserve Officer Training Corps, if you're not going at that, or if you're not going abroad to join the Israeli army, you train in the war of ideas, which is even more difficult than training on the battlefield. We haven't even begun that training yet, but I think it's a very serious thing that we have to undertake, because we have to win this. We can't be frivolous about it. And I think that to send the kids off to school without that training, and without training like in parrying, if you learn fencing, you know how to fence. It doesn't come easily, but somebody says this, you say that. You do it instinctively. You know how to answer everybody before they even open their mouth. You anticipate every attack from where it's going to come, who's going to say what. And you know the details that you have to know. This is not the same thing as the learning, opening yourself up to new ideas. All of that, I think, we would say, muvan me'elav. It's understood without even being spoken. Of course we want all that. But I think that, that in what we are up against at this moment, I would really say that we can't afford snowflakes. The Jews are the schools are the ones themselves that should be demanding maturity in the same way that Tikvah interviews everybody before they accept them for their fellowships. You have to have the intellectual and the maturity of your age in order to come. So schools should certainly demand it. But I think that the community has to make this a value. And this military language, let me say, it's not here to frighten, it's here to reassure. That you find that the people who are most confident sometimes are those who are the best trained for the combat that they are going to have to encounter. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Talia, you alluded to in your remarks, so maybe you should take the first stab at that.
Sure. There are a plethora of Jewish institutions at Michigan because I think a solid 15-20% of the student population is Jewish. So we have Hillel, we have Chabad, we have something called Jewish Resource Center, which I believe is run by Aish. And then within that, there are subgroups. So I was very active in what we call O-Minyan, so the Orthodox Minyan. I'm not Orthodox myself, at least at that time, but I found that those people really took their Judaism seriously. So I really enjoyed being with them, and I lived with them. I found that Chabad was the best resource because their primary goal is not necessarily to encourage political activity or to encourage, being kind of wrapped up in various campus politics that might not be productive. It was very focused on growing Jewishly, finding a Jewish community, making sure you had a place to go for Shabbat, for Passover, for whatever you need. And they were always there to answer the tough questions you may have. And I think that's really valuable. I think Chabad's a fantastic resource no matter where you go. So I think if all else fails, I think that is the best place, at least for me, to find a meaningful Jewish community. I think the Jewish community, they all say 2 Jews, 3 opinions. I feel like that's really the case in other organizations like Hillel. It's very diverse, the population there, and as well as the staff come from very different perspectives, religiously, politically, different interests, and it can be a little more difficult and challenging, I think, to navigate that space. So for me, I think the best way to go is Chabad if you're thinking of growing Jewishly. They have fantastic classes as well that I found really valuable too.
Would one of you like to, Raina?
I just want to add on to what Talia was saying about these institutions. This is a really amazing time in your life when these institutions want to invest in you. Like any other time in your life, if you want to learn more about Judaism, if you want to grow as a Jew, you're going to have to pay exorbitant sums of money to do that. And you can walk into a Chabad house when you're an undergraduate. You can walk into an Orthodox meeting you've never been to. The borders of communities of institutions are really porous when you're at this age. And just take advantage of it, whether it's going on Birthright, whether it's going on a Hartman trip to Israel, whether it's doing the Tikvah fellowship, whatever it is, walk into these institutions and take advantage of all the resources they're throwing at you because it doesn't last forever.
I will say also the reputations of various institutions vary across campuses, so definitely do your homework, figure out what place is best for you, really take advantage. Don't be afraid to walk into a space and feel like you have to walk out of it. You're a student, you're kind of the customer, figure out what's best for you.
Adam, how's it look from your
I'll
vantage
second all of that, definitely. But note, on Princeton's campus, for instance, our Hillel, the CJL, Center for Jewish Life, is put in a tricky position, right? I mean, on the one hand, they are an affirmatively Zionist organization. On the other hand, maybe half of the Jewish community on campus is either not pro-Israel or actively anti-Israel. So what then is the institution to do? I think most of us, for most of us in the room here, it's pretty clear. But they are sort of in this tricky position. The second primary Jewish institution on campus is Chabad. So I'll note what I really do appreciate about Chabad, seconding what Talia had said. When I go to Jewish classes or the Jewish classes offered at the Hillel, the CJL, truth is I'm going to get the same message from the CJL, from our Hillel, as I would for any other social justice institution on campus. I know the social justice, the Tikkun Olam message that I'm going to get. What I found Chabad offers on campus is a unique Jewish approach. There I can go for authentic Torah learning, and that's something that I've really appreciated about Chabad on my own campus.
Isn't that amazing what Chabad has built?
Can I just add one thing on this note of Hillel? I just want to also add that a fantastic resource that I think existed on all 3 of our campuses within Hillel, or housed by Hillel in many cases, is the Orthodox Union Jewish Learning Institute on campus, I think OUJLIC, which has really offers exactly what we were talking about in terms of substantive learning, not just from Chabad, but also available in Hillel's from a more traditional, also adamantly Zionist perspective, I would say.
Maybe Adam, you start and think about bringing Jewish identity into these contexts, what are you drawing on?
I would say first and foremost, parents and families, home communities, recognize that you don't just, right, you don't arrive in college as a blank slate. You've actually been formed by your families. If you attend a Jewish day school, by your Jewish day school. I might almost like soft skills that you've gotten from home that aren't appreciated around campus, that don't exist around campus. So take time to reflect, how can I actually distill the practices that I've grown up with into lessons and morals? What is it that I've been taught, and then how can I engage with that on the college campus? I think that comes to mind first and foremost.
Ruth, did you have something in mind?
No.
What that training might look like that you alluded to?
A 5-minute Prager commercial. They seem to do it so, it's not my kind of thinking at all, because as you see, I mean, my daughter says to me very often, sound bites, Mom, sound bites. Well, I can't think in sound bites, but he can.
Yeah.
If you watch those 5-minute things, they teach you exactly, how to say it very crisply and how to know exactly how to manage the attacks.
I'll say that I'm sometimes asked by students, shouldn't I hear about the darker, the challenging things that are in Israel's history from people who love Israel and support Israel, so that I'm prepared for hearing people lob accusations at Israel? It's not the first time that I've heard it. But my answer to that is always, wouldn't it be better to educate children in just world history? Like, what is it like everywhere and always when states are formed? What is it like everywhere and always when there is conflict over land? So that one really teaches young people that there's nothing so unique to drum up your political outrage about here. That this is the way the world works in many respects. Much more than to say, let's inoculate them by telling them bad stories about things that Israel has done. So I would say more history.
I guess I'll start with the reason why I went to Michigan was I went to a very small Jewish day school my whole life, and I only wanted to go to a state school with decent reputation for academics. Michigan seemed like a good fit, plus they had a good football program, so I was in. There are different motivations. I think some people, they come into college because they want to study and prepare for a career very narrowly. And in doing so, they develop intellectually and professionally and personally. I think YU is a fantastic fit for a lot of people. For me, I had an idea of what I wanted to study, and Michigan had a program that I really enjoyed, and I kind of had to navigate that space to grow in all those ways I just mentioned. But you're definitely right, and I think just kind of going back to the last question, if you find yourself in a space that isn't like YU, it's like a giant school like Michigan, you can make it smaller, and you can grow intellectually with all these offshore programs, I guess, Tikvah Fund being one of them. There are other great programs like the Hertog Foundation has some fantastic programs as well. I would just read a lot. This is really something I regret is reading more in college, and that will open your eyes to a lot of other ideas and also lead you to interact with people who you might not interact with. There was a time when I read some books in my senior year, and I emailed them cold, and I met with them in DC, and then I kind of found myself into a fellowship out of that. And I just think that I wouldn't confine yourself to whatever university you find yourself in. There are so many things outside, like Raina said, there's so many places that they want you to come and learn with them. I would take advantage of that opportunity.
So Adam, I know you were studying in yeshiva after high school and before college, and so there must have been people you were studying with who were heading to YU and people you were studying with who were heading to other places. And so what's your perspective on making that decision?
And with respect to YU, which is, of course, a wonderful institution, it does seem to me that there's value to being a guest at someone else's table. You could go to a school like any of the 3 schools we go to or attended and actually add value by giving your Jewish perspective, contributing to the conversation. I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's not for everyone, but I do think there's value there. And then secondly, I think there is actually real value in a certain type of diversity. When encountering a new idea, there's what to be learned. I mean, the odds that you'll encounter every truth in the world, every right idea by the time you're 18, extremely low, right? So I've certainly learned a ton, learned so much from interacting with people from different backgrounds, when my ideas rub up against their ideas, and then, we find new ideas. So I think YU's certainly the right path for some people, but I think there's also great value in the opportunity to share your Jewish tradition in the appropriate way. And then also, of course, there is what to learn from other traditions, other communities, and meet new people who you otherwise would not encounter.
My armor came from this room right here, studying with these 2 people on either end of me. That's definitely a large part of it. I think I acquired my armor a little bit later than everyone else on this panel for my story. But I definitely think, as Adam and as Dr. Wisse initially told me several years ago, really, your parents are where it really begins. I think. Yeah, and I had an elementary school Jewish education. I didn't have a Jewish education beyond that, but that was definitely the formation of my armor. I went to a strongly Zionist, pluralistic elementary school. I continued having a Jewish community throughout, even after I didn't go to Jewish day school, always remaining involved in the community, and really having parents who cared about Judaism, who cared about ideas, and who cared about the intersection of them, provided strong armor for me throughout.
Talia, I want to amplify something you said. You said being attacked is not being canceled. And so, say, in this context of this, I mean, to say that is in a way to say that an attack is okay, like in a way that there's something that you should be prepared for that, and I think that's what the questioner is referring to when they're talking about armor.
Yeah, I mean,
so how do you come to that perspective?
I mean, one, it's kind of this realization that that's just life. You're going to get attacked. Not everyone's going to like you, and the sooner you accept that, I think the easier it is to develop your own worldview. So there's that. And, in being attacked, or, I think that's a strong verb, but in being attacked on college campus for what you think, you kind of sift out who matters, what matters to you, who's going to be there for you, who's curious enough to listen to you. And I think that really is helpful for your personal development as well. I was able to find this one mentor who was really influential to me, and I otherwise would not have found it if I was not attacked. So, I definitely wouldn't shy away from always feeling like, everything in college has to go exactly according to plan. Because, in life, I've come to learn, and my dad was actually he was in the IDF, so he knows quite a bit about being attacked. He actually came to America because he got injured by a grenade and learned how to code while he was recovering, and then he got a scholarship to Adelphi. So he kind of taught me how to pivot, how to kind of push through adversity when he came here, kind of not knowing any English or finding his way. And I think I didn't have to experience that adversity, thank God, but I think embracing any adversity that does come your way and seeing it as an opportunity to grow is really important, especially at this age.
Adam?
I would only just say that, or at least in my own case, I don't think I arrived with armor. So I usually use the term canceled. Maybe attacked is a better verb. So I've had more than a few op-eds written about me in the student paper. And when it happens, it's shattering. At least it was for me. and it hurts, and you kind of just move on. I think no matter how much knowledge you have, I don't know that that's armor per se, but ultimately for me, what helped me think through it and kind of move on is recognize, well, we bow before God and not before men. So it could be there'll be 1.5 million op-eds about us, exorcised from certain settings or social communities, but that's not ultimately who we serve.
Adam, why don't you start, because you started Tikvah at the youngest age, right? You were a high school student when you first did Tikvah program. So, I mean, I feel a little embarrassed to ask you this question, but what's so great about us?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Everything is great about Tikvah. I think that what Tikvah, I do think there's value to sort of like thinking about having the instinctual reaction to the anti-Israel rhetoric, to the anti-Jewish rhetoric, anti-religious rhetoric, or whatever it is. But I think there's also value to spending time digging deep into those ideas and recognizing why you should have that instinct, why that should be reflexive for you. And I think that's what Tikvah gave me. It introduced me to a community of people who were interested in those same ideas, who cared about those similar things, and gave me the tools and resources to engage for myself in studying and learning. So I recognize, such is the case, and whatever it is, well, Tikvah helps me study that, really. Maybe that wasn't exactly clear, but.
No, it really was. I think, one piece of advice I would give people who are just starting college is I would spend time studying philosophy. That was a big mistake I made going into college. I thought, study hard data, hard facts about history. I was in a public policy program, so it was very quantitative. It was not, political science or political philosophy. And when I came to Tikvah, I was actually, for the first time introduced to philosophers. I never heard Nietzsche before. I'd never heard that name before until I came to Tikvah, which is shocking for a lot of people in this room, I bet, and a little embarrassing. But it really does help you shape your worldview and sharpen the way you think about the world. And it puts all these numbers and these headlines into context for you. And it forces you to, face, why do you believe what you believe? And I think that makes you stronger in your opinions. It makes you more confident when you fight the good fight. And Tikvah was able to introduce that to me, and also introduce me to, for the first time, a classroom with intellectually curious people who are just there to learn and to develop their thinking. And that wasn't the case in college. So Tikvah actually introduced me to this learning style that I didn't have the opportunity to experience in college, and that was really, really something for me.
And I have to speak up on behalf of Ruth and myself and say, philosophy, yes, even more so literature and Jewish literature.
Right.
Adam, why don't you start with that? And you can feel free to talk about some of the organizations that you're a part of.
Yeah, sure. Let me also just hop back to that previous question real quickly. Really practically, what Tikvah has been helpful for me is connecting me with individual people, individual professors who can help me think on my own campus. Tikvah has recommended a whole series of professors who I've taken courses with, and that's been really fantastic and rewarding. To the question, though, I think that the truth is, let's take Israel. The truth is that Israel is so politicized today that, in my case, as I've seen on my campus, perhaps it's different on other campuses, but it is a conservative issue. Even if you're a progressive and support Israel, the costs are just too great from what I've been told to be an outspoken supporter of Israel. It's just not worth it for you. You won't have any community, really. Professor Rubenstein mentioned the organizations I'm involved in. So I, for one, lead the Princeton Story, the conservative journal on my campus. and we recently had an Israel issue. So we gave platform to people from all different backgrounds. Of course, the Tory is not a majority Jewish organization, and gave platform for them to support Israel, and gave reason for them to study Israel, think about this question. So I think conservatives on my campus have been a very natural ally. I might only add that this past spring, when we had when there was a skirmish between Israel and Hamas, we came out with the pro-Israel group, Tigers for Israel. We wrote a pro-Israel petition and came out with it. I felt very, very disappointed in the amount of conservatives who didn't feel comfortable putting their names on this petition. Oftentimes, they said in private, "Hey, Adam, yeah, I totally support this," but even as a conservative, this issue is so contentious, it's not worth me publicly putting my name down in support of Israel. There will be real consequences for me, they tell me. Maybe, maybe not. So to answer your question directly, I think conservatives, at least that's been the case on my campus, but even so, a limited, bold, and courageous group of conservatives.
Any thoughts on this question of outside of the Jewish community, who do you find support for in shoring up this moral self-confidence?
I don't have broad thoughts, but having friends outside the Jewish community I think is really important on this issue. A lot of people are isolationist, or in terms of especially who they talk about this issue with. A lot of Jews won't talk about this issue with their non-Jewish friends because they feel it is simply too divisive, or that these conversations don't go anywhere. Knowing how to have a good conversation about Israel and knowing that you have friends who are open-minded is incredibly important, and I think that's the most important way that you find allies, because what are allies if not friends?
I think the vast majority of college students on the Israel issue especially are kind of apathetic, or, I mean, this is a strong word, but kind of ignorant. They don't quite know where to stand, what it means. We hear about this war going on. And I think really the best thing you can do is just be a proud, open Jew. Don't, be unapologetically yourself. People will, the idea of a Jewish person or a Zionist will become less of a foreign concept. And when you befriend people and you're honest about who you are, you'll discover who your allies are in that process. And you do that through not necessarily joining Israel clubs or political clubs, but just kind of whatever really interests you, and then just being unapologetically yourself. And it might take a little bit of time, but eventually you will find those people.
Ruth, I have to say, and this is, by the way, an anecdote that you can read in Ruth's recently published memoirs, which are just wonderful, Free as a Jew, but wasn't there a story of like the Catholic Student Association coming to you to be their faculty sponsor, and sort of
Yes.
the strangeness of that, but they just saw in you like perhaps the only person who would sort of
Yeah.
stand behind what they were trying to do?
Well, it's very much what you were saying, Adam, that of course it's not just that one of the first years that I was at Harvard, the Republican Club had their annual meeting at Hillel. And it was, it was just a convenience as well that it was offered them, but it was also a natural fit that they thought that, the Jewish venue would be suitable for them. And again, it's not because the majority of students there were. But I would say the Christian groups or something. You see, it's interesting that your conversations, I mean, what you're saying is so genuine and true and deep and the most important things to say. But it isn't coalition building. And to some extent, since one is on the campus now where the political energy, if Israel is actually such a hot issue, and if it's under so much assault, and if you have things like Apartheid Week on a campus, I mean, there are things which should never have been allowed. And here each year we become more accommodating in our thoughts. We say, well, yes, this is there, as if this is a as if this should be there or could be there. Well, I think in some sense we have to push back to the beginnings. The Arab war against the Jews is the longest war, and it's the most lopsided war in history, and it's still ongoing, and it uses the Palestinians as its excuse, and it is intolerable. And I think it's interesting the degree to which we have internalized, well, this is the way it is. I would say that in a way this is the reason it's important to understand how much this is pitched against the Western world and against Western values and against democracy and now against America, to bring down the best of America, to make it feel as if it is a racist country and that it was born out of slavery, and to distort its own history, to do all these things to this country. This is extremely dangerous. And I would say we know it from the inside. We should not accommodate to step one. So yes, I mean, I think that your question about allies is very important. They are there, whether individually through friendships or people whom you convince, but they have to be sought out and cultivated. I think it's self-evident. I'm a Canadian citizen too, but I am an American citizen, and I love this country. I mean, I always believed in this country. It is the most important country of the free world. It is exceptional. And what's more, if you care about Israel, you cannot give up on American support for Israel. But you also cannot give up on America. And you know, one of the books that I most love is Agnon's book, A Guest for the Night. I really recommend it to everybody. It's such an extraordinary book. And he writes about being a guest for the night because he went back to his town of Buchach, and in East Central Europe, right? And he writes, using this phrase which comes from the Tanakh, that he was a guest for the night in a way, and he sees it as that kind of diaspora experience of being a guest in somebody else's house. I don't know how you feel about this, but if Jews now begin to feel themselves to be guests in America, wow, what does this say about how America has begun to alienate its own citizens? I mean, that's not supposed to be the way people feel in this country. You're supposed to feel that you have an equal opportunity, and also an equal opportunity to make your case as effectively as you possibly can and to win it, right?
One of the most often included texts in Tikvah curricula, it often finds its way into curricula you wouldn't even expect it in, is George Washington's letter to the Newport congregation, which says very, very plainly from the beginning, it's not about tolerating a guest.
Right.
It's about being a citizen,
Sure.
and that's what the Jews are invited to be in America.
It's a tough question. You know, I'm not an admissions expert, and I remember when I applied, I kind of kept it a little quiet. I didn't really have a formal worldview at all. I had a very innocuous comment essay about fantasy football and SpongeBob, so I might not be the best person here. But look, I think, you know, the goal of a college application is to show what kind of student you'll be, and what formative experiences can impact the student you are. I think your experience and how it might have impacted, you know, your household would be a fantastic thing to write about. I don't think that's something worth hiding. And you know, I think at this point we're all expecting what admissions people want to hear, and we will write what they want to hear. And I think it gets to a point where no one can be set apart from each other. So I think just kind of being very honest about where you're coming from. I don't think it should be overtly political, and I don't think you should make something that a lot of people would find controversial. But if something like, your family history, the fact that you're Jewish is important, I don't see how that will affect, your admissions to a school. That being said, I know some people have the perspective of go in, get your degree, and then use your degree against them. And I'm sympathetic to that position. It is the application is between you and the admissions person. So, I don't think you will feel compromised or uncomfortable kind of being a little more vague. I think that's up to you. But then again, I don't think there will be a huge impact based on the background that you just gave us on whether, someone will accept or not. But that's my non-expert opinion of running about fantasy football and SpongeBob. So
I want to read that now, Talia.
Probably don't.
Raina, do you have any insight on this?
I have no insight into this question.
Okay.
I didn't write about politics at all in my college applications.
Adam, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very tricky one. On the one hand, Hillel has this wonderful play. He writes about the grocer who puts up under the USSR or communist rule, this "Workers of the World Unite" sign. Not because he believes it, but because he's scared of what might happen to him if he wouldn't put it up. And Hillel notes that this grocer is then actually upholding the system. So I think in hiding, there's good case to be made that you're actually upholding the system and you're part of the problem. I think there's a very good case to be made. On the other hand, bills need to be paid. I don't know. There's still real benefits of going to an elite university. I myself, I'm applying for things, whether it's postgrad fellowships, jobs. I have 2 resumes, one that includes my political activism, one that doesn't. And I think right there are just real prudential concerns. So to pick up on Talia's point, my professor just shared this with me the other day. He said he kept his head, he's now a prominent conservative professor. He said he kept his head down until he got tenure. He calls it the John Paul II strategy. The Pope kept his head down until he became Pope, and then he started speaking out against communism. So I think there's a compelling case to be made for either of these two, but both of them sort of have the North Star of ultimately I will speak the truth. Ultimately, I will kind of do the right thing. The question is when, right? Like for the professor, clear tenure. For you, is it college graduation, jobs? Right? I think that's a tricky question too.
Ruth, do you have any wisdom to shed on this difficult
No, but
prudential question?
no, but that's exactly what's been said here is, of course, on my conscience all the time. Writing letters of recommendation for students, of course, you want them to be accepted. And so you're up against the same problem. I have told some students who I knew where they were applying to that they would do better not to ask me for a recommendation, because I thought that a recommendation from me would be a kiss of death. So it is tricky, but I think that it's very true. I mean, we know when to be strategic, and we know when not to be. And I don't think anybody should be doing themselves personal harm before the fact, because you're quite right. One has to get in, even in order to wage, in order to make your case, right? Otherwise, you never get in. Very difficult question to answer.
So thank you all very, very much for